Greetings, War Thunderers. This is Longshot with a guide on how to fly the XP-50 in arcade. This is a Tier 3 premium plane, current battle rating of 4.0. As you can see, it has two engines, but it's certainly not what you'd call a heavy fighter. In fact, it's quite small and light. Look at the size of those radial engines compared with the rest of the plane. They look absolutely massive. And that should give you immediately an idea of what to expect from it. A pretty huge power to weight ratio, which means phenomenal acceleration and climb rate. By way of historical background, this plane was developed from the XF-50, which was a failed attempt to create a twin-engine carrier fighter. They redesigned the fuselage to create the XP-50, which was a land-based version of the plane, and by all accounts it performed very well. But by this stage of the war, the P-38 was already in service, so it just wasn't needed. Moving along, the plane's armed with a pair of 20mm cannon and a pair of 50 cal machine guns all clustered in the nose. There's a bit of shielding in front of and behind the pilot, but no armoured glass to protect him in head-ons. The X-ray shows fuel tanks behind and under the pilot, which should present a fairly small target, but I can tell you that this plane catches fire easily, and its engines are also quick to take damage. So let's see how it handles in a test flight. Its best climb rate can be achieved at an indicative airspeed close to 245 km an hour. From an Assaulter spawn point of 2,500 meters, and you should always use the Assaulter spawn point for this plane, it can get past an astonishing 5,000 meters in 2 webs. There is not one fighter in its battle ranking range that is capable of outclimbing the XP-50 at the start of a battle. This plane will get you above every other fighter in the battle without fail, unless you're up against another XP-50. And not only that, it keeps climbing well right up past 8,000 meters, should you ever need to go that high. And at high altitude it's very fast, outperforming P-38s, P-51Ds and possibly P-47s. So let's put it through some manoeuvres, and as usual, I'll start with its roll speed. It's about average, I guess. Certainly not as fast as many single-engine fighters, but I've seen slower roll rates on twin-engine planes. I'll put the plane into a horizontal turn to test the strength of its elevators, and I'm looking at a couple of things here. Firstly, the size of the circle, the smaller the better, and the circle here is fairly small. But also whether it can catch its smoke trail, which it can't quite. I'd say its turning here is similar to a BF-109 F4, though maybe not quite as good. And the longer I hold the turn, the more speed it loses, and the further it gets away from its smoke trail. It'll eventually drop right down to 270 km an hour, which is not great at all. The plane's good for a quick half turn, but in a sustained dogfight it will lose its speed and become an easy target, and that's what I see happening to a lot of XP-50s, people getting into turn fights and losing their planes. Anyway, now I'm going to use both left rudder and up elevator together, and the plane wants to climb a lot more than it wants to yaw to the side, and that makes for a steep climbing spiral, and shows that the rudder is fairly weak on this plane. I generally suggest keeping the plane tilted over a bit more in a climbing spiral than I am here to avoid losing too much speed, but even below 200 km an hour the plane's happy to just keep on climbing. It's that amazing power to weight ratio in action. The plane would be happy to keep going, but there's many other things I want to test, so I'll move right along. And take a look at its high-speed handling, beginning with its roll rate. It starts to tighten at 500 km an hour and continues to slow down past 600 km an hour to the point where you won't be able to easily roll and follow a dodging target. And also, despite diving from nearly 5,000 meters altitude, it can't quite reach 800 km an hour. That's similar to a Spitfire 2B in a dive. Heavier planes will be able to outrun you. Let's see how well it tracks the mouse cursor. And that's actually pretty good. There's hardly any lifting of the nose as I move the mouse from side to side. Its high-speed handling is not the best by any means, but certainly above average. And now it's time to test its ability to zoom climb. This vertical climb is not something I do in-game, it's simply a means of measuring its ability to recover altitude out of a dive. And it gains 2,000 meters before dropping below 200 km an hour, which is good but not great. A Corsair 1A, for example, can recover 2,600 meters. Here I'll keep climbing right up to a stall hammerhead, and because the plane's so light and such a good climber, I'll take it literally to the point of stall before I perform the turn. It flips over quickly enough, but the plane's completely out of control. It takes several seconds before it aligns with the mouse cursor, so it'll probably prefer to be travelling a little faster in a hammerhead, so I'll give it another try. This time I'll turn the plane at 130 kilometers an hour. The turn is slower, but this time the plane is completely under my control now. Normally that'd be the last test I'd perform here, but there's a new one I want to try. From an altitude of 3,000 meters, traveling at 300 kilometers an hour, I'm going to hit WEP and see how it goes performing a series of Immelmann turns, one after the other. This is an extremely punishing test. So far I've only tried this with 2 other planes. The XP-50 Mark III can perform 3 Immelmanns, probably more, and the Spitfire 2B can only manage 2 and stalls on the 3rd. As you can see, I'm giving the plane no time to recover. I'm just rolling it over and then straight into the next climb. That's 2 done. And now it'll lose its WEP halfway up the climb. So, will it match the Hayabusa with 3 Immelmann turns, or will it stall like the Spitfire did? My money was on the plane stalling, but no, it manages to power through and complete the manoeuvre without any loss of control. What's more, I'm even able to push it further and complete a 4th Immelmann. Yes, this plane can match the Hayabusa in vertical manoeuvres, although the Hayabusa will of course fly circles around it in a dogfight. But going by what I've seen here, the plane will be fairly good at boom and zooming and absolutely superb at stall fighting. Here's my typical setup with this plane. Stealth ammo for everything, as that lets me start firing from long range without alerting the target, and convergence set to 800 meters because the weapons are all nose mounted. And most importantly, choose the assaulter spawn point, not the fighters, as it gives you an extra 500 meters altitude for free. This plane already climbs at about the same rate as a XP-50, and that can reach 4,500 meters in 2 WEPs from a fighter spawn, so provided you climb at the correct airspeed, 245 kilometers an hour, you can reach around 5,000 meters in 2 WEPs as I said before, significantly better than any other fighter you're likely to meet. I usually climb on a slight angle to the battle, and this is how things commonly look during the initial merge. I'm ridiculously high, way above any other fighter. If someone tries to climb up and target you, like this Focke-Wulf 190 is doing, just outclimb them until they've lost all their energy, after which it's a simple matter of rolling into a diving attack and scoring yourself an easy kill. And because of the XP-50's climbing ability, you want people trying to climb up to you. It's so easy just to keep out of their reach and then dive when they're out of speed, but I'll show more of that later on. First, let's take a brief look at how well the plane performs in a boom and zoom roll. And I know its roll speed only starts to slow beyond 500 kilometers an hour, so where possible, I prefer not to go much above that speed if I can help it. And to avoid having to rely on my plane's high-speed handling, I prefer my targets are otherwise occupied and as slow as possible, like this climbing LA-5, who was firing at a firebrand and setting him on fire, and I roll to follow his evasion attempt, and that's an easy kill. So the first thing is, choose climbing targets as a matter of priority, simply because they're so much easier to destroy and your mediocre roll speed won't be exposed. Here's another example. A Corsair and a Hurricane are both engaging targets. The Corsair appears to be climbing. The Cane's on fire and is likely to turn and chase his target, so I'll focus on the Corsair, who climbs right into my guns. This plane's not like a Focke-Wulf 190, for example, which can spam a ton of cannon shells in the general direction of an enemy and hit them. You need to be accurate, so it's very important to choose targets that are easy to hit. But of course you won't always have climbers to attack. If nobody wants to climb, you'll need to boom and zoom more aggressively. And this is harder, as the targets have more speed, which allows them to dodge your attacks, and you're likely to be travelling faster, which means you'll lose some of your ability to roll. Though on this occasion, the 185's attempt to turn presented his full profile to my guns. But for every successful attack like that one, there's always 2 or 3, where the opponents roll and dodge just enough to make it impossible to target them, unless you wanted to stay down here and commit to a dogfight, and if you do that, it's a great way to get yourself killed. Here's another example, the Spitfire rolling into a split S and easily escaping my attack. Don't be tricked into trying to turn fight when this kind of thing happens. Just maintain your speed and climb on out of there. As if enemy fighters catch you on an equal footing, they will quickly expose the XP-50's weaknesses in a dogfight. And in case you don't believe me, I have a perfect example right here. I'm in control of bomber altitude at 4,200-300 meters, and I spot an IL-2 trying to helicopter on up to me. Obviously, he has no hope of succeeding. He's only setting himself up as a target, so I'm into a diving attack. I roll to match his heading, but I target the fuselage instead of the wings, and he survives. And instead of zoom climbing, I'm annoyed at missing the kill, and I pull a hard turn for a second shot before he can get away. Green Tracer will tell me that the BF-109 that was down here has me in his sights, so I know I'm in trouble and I break immediately into a climbing spiral. However, that hard turn has cost me 200 kilometers an hour. This climbing spiral is bleeding even more energy, so even though I've escaped, the BF-109 is trying and failing to chase me in the spiral. I'm exposed to new planes arriving on the scene, such as a newly spawned Spitfire. Note that I'm not attempting to turn with them, I'm simply trying to pull a manoeuvre that they can't easily follow and thereby regain my altitude advantage. And it was working until I tried for a shot at this 109 who just stalled, and I couldn't quite pull enough lead to hit him, and in taking that shot I've allowed the Spitfire time to catch up. Even worse, I've taken my eyes off the Spitfire. I'm no longer sure where exactly he is, but I'm about to find out. There he is. If I'd ignored that shot at the 109 and kept climbing, I'd possibly have escaped this situation, but there's no escape for me now, as the Spitfire kills my left engine. I can see Manversart's 109 is climbing for a second shot, so I decide it's time to face him head on and then dive away if I can, but he sets me alight. Now you have about a 50% chance of putting a fire out if you cut your engine immediately, which I forgot to do here. But it wasn't the fire that killed me, it was my decision to turn fight instead of zoom climbing. Oh, and Manversart will feature again toward the end of this video. So that's boom and zoom. What I really enjoy doing with the XP-50 though, and this is where it's at its strongest, is baiting people into attacking me so I can get them to stall their planes. Here I flew nice and straight, letting that 109 below me think I was an easy target, then I'm lifting into the climbing spiral to keep out of his gun sights. The instant he starts to fall behind, I level off, and once his nose drops and he stops firing, I know his plane has stalled, and now it's my turn. Couldn't quite land a killing blow, but when I turned the camera, look at all that wreckage falling out of the sky. A few moments later and his plane does hit the dirt. Now that is more satisfying than any boom and zoom. In this next example, an A6M2 is trying to climb up to me, and I want to stall him out before diving to attack in order to avoid the possibility of facing him head on. This time I'm using simple elevator turns just to keep out of reach until he's stalled. And now it's time to attack before he can recover and get away. I use WEP in the dive to accelerate as quickly as possible, but I don't WEP while firing as it can spoil your aim. Here's a very similar example. I'm flying above the zone in an air domination battle, and an A6M2 decides he wants to climb up and attack me. Again, I'm in a simple horizontal turn directly above him, elevators only, which makes it difficult for him to keep track of me while I wait for him to lose his speed in the climb. I judge the moments right now, I'm into the attack, shooting him down before he can regain his speed and either escape or start to maneuver. Once again, elevator turns were all that I needed to position my plane. In many other fighters I'd recommend using the rudder a lot more, but I found the XP-50 handles better without it, except for when you're performing climbing spirals or hammerhead turns. Anyway, rather than showing you isolated examples, here's the highlights of a full battle. This wasn't one of my best games, but as it develops, the various aspects of the XP-50 really are put to the test. As you can see, it's Stalingrad, winter domination, and I've effortlessly climbed way above everyone else. The Ki-49 to my right looks like an easy target, so that's where I'll begin. A friendly Ki-43 gets to him first, but I'm committed to the attack, so if you can't shoot him down, then I will. The flammability of this plane is definitely a consideration when it comes to engaging bombers. Either attack them at high speed or from an angle where you're not exposed to their gunners. Anyway, I'm heading toward the highest enemy fighters, and there's my friend Manversart in another 109. Recognizing the huge energy advantage I have at the moment, he rightly dives away. For now, anyway. In domination, there's no real incentive for anyone to contest high altitude as the battle progresses, and in this battle nobody does. So I decide to boom and zoom the furball over the central airfield. Does anyone remember when this map only had 2 airfields and nothing in the middle? It was one of the best maps in the game back then. Not sure why they decided a 3rd airfield was necessary. Anyway, I've picked out that Corsair as the easiest target. I'm aiming carefully, and down he goes. Then very gently up into a zoom climb, avoiding any harsh manoeuvres that would cost me speed, and checking to see if anyone wants to follow me. Unfortunately, nobody does. And usually in a boom and zoomer you don't necessarily want people to chase you, but in this plane you certainly do, as they make ideal rope-a-dope candidates. A short time later a TBF spawns in, and here I do something really stupid. I risk a head-on, however brief, because I was scared that he'd dive away. I pull up and get him to stall as he tries to follow me, but only after taking damage, as I held the head-on for longer than I should. It's just so easy for an XP-50 to lose an engine or be set alight. Take my advice and avoid head-ons unless you really have no other choice. There's also the lack of armoured glass to protect the pilot. Anyway, it wasn't long before once again I was dropping into a high-speed boom and zoom. As is common in these battles, everyone was diving from the spawn straight to the furball, and this was the only safe way to engage that furball in this plane. I picked out the LA5, but he starts dodging around. I can't possibly roll that fast, but he does let me put a shot into him before I'm overshooting and extending away. And whatever damage I did there was enough to send him into the dirt. I'm still looking and hoping that someone on the enemy team will target me. It's like, I'd like nothing more than for planes to be trying to climb and attack me rather than diving into that furball. But Man vs. Art has just sent his greetings, so there is hope. Except I don't exactly know where he is, and this throws me into a bit of a mild panic. Looking around, where is he? He could have side-climbed, maybe using the cloud as cover while I was busy. Even now he might be preparing to launch a surprise boom and zoom attack. Where on earth has he got to? Eventually I used my brain and checked the leaderboard and saw that he wasn't actually in a plane right now. But as I fly over the stream of incoming fighters, there he is. Man vs. Art is back for a second round. I'm going to fly straight at him and see if he accepts the challenge. And yes, it does look like he's climbing, so I level my plane in order to lure him upwards and hopefully induce him to stall in an effort to get guns on me when we cross over. I'll lift up just a little more as I have no idea how much energy he's carrying right now. And then I'll lose my nerve and lift into a steep climb, which creates too much separation and I lose the chance of catching him in a stall. As I look down, I see an I-185 and a Yak-7 also taking a bit of interest. In fact, I'm thinking of attacking the I-185 when Man vs. Art uses the speed from his dive to helicopter up at me, and I have to respond to that move. He successfully ambushed me in the previous game while I attacked someone else. I don't want to let him do the same thing a second time if I can help it. He definitely seems to be committed to the fight though, so I'll climb a bit higher to lure him away from his friends. And now things are going to get interesting as a B-7A2 spawns in. I'm just waiting patiently for Man vs. Art to make another attempt at a helicopter attack. Right, here he comes I think, just checking on the B-7A2. Yep, he's definitely climbing. And I drop into a dive hoping to catch him at the top of his climb. But he's wise to what I'm doing, and he's already rolled over into a dive of his own. And then he goes evasive to make sure I won't get a firing solution. There's no point chasing him down through his fighter spawn, plus I have the B-7A2 to worry about. And there he is, only 1.5 kilometers behind me and closing in. In my past experience fighting B-7A2s though, it's been quite easy to defeat them. You just climb above them, their energy rapidly depletes if they try to follow you. And that's what I'm doing here, except he continued to climb much longer than I thought possible, and I ended up having to snap roll past him. I'll extend out of reach and then look to climb again. Yes, he seems pretty low on energy there, and as I start to climb, he decides to dive away. There he goes. I'll chase him a bit just to make sure. Yep, he's running, so hopefully that should allow me to concentrate on Man vs. Art, who has climbed back up for another shot at the title. He's been climbing for quite a distance, chances are he hasn't the energy to point straight up at me right now, and he might not be expecting me to attack straight away, which is what I'm doing. And instead of diving away, he rolls evasively, which denies me a clean shot, so I need to zoom climb again before I overshoot. And the B-7A2 is back. He hadn't quit the dogfight, as I'd expected he might. He merely dived away to recover his speed. I'm in a steep climbing spiral to keep out of his gun sights, but he's again following me for longer than I thought he could and getting a shot at me as well. I hammerhead over just as he finally stalls, and suddenly I'm able to catch Man vs. Art as he runs out of speed in another helicopter attack. Then I'm continuing in the dive to take a shot at this B-25 who's been hanging around hoping for a shot at me, and yes, I've lost a wingtip. The B-7A2 still had enough manoeuvrability despite stalling his plane to roll back toward me and take a shot as I flashed past him in the dive. So how was that B-7A2 able to put so much pressure on me? Well, firstly, it looks like its flight model may have received a boost in patch 1.53, and that's something I need to go and test for myself. The other reason was the fact that although this plane is a brilliant climber, it doesn't retain much energy in a zoom climb, which can allow you to be caught and forced to maneuver as I was in that battle. In summary though, I have to say I love this plane. I mean, it's hard not to love a fighter that can so easily outclimb everyone else at the start of a battle. But more than that, it's a decent boom and zoomer, but its stall fighting abilities are among the best in the game, and the P-38 is green with envy at this plane's high altitude performance. Among its weaknesses are its flammability, the damage easily taken by its engines, its mediocre zoom climb, roll speed and rudder, but its strengths outweigh its weaknesses. And while it can turn fairly well at high speed, don't let that seduce you into trying to dogfight with other fighters. That's how I see a lot of other XP-50s being used in War Thunder Arcade, and they seldom last very long. And as you can see, the plane does not fly very well when it's missing part of a wing. In my next How to Fly video, I'm going to finally bite the bullet and take a look at the P-51D5, so if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. But that's all I have for you in this video. Until my next one, good hunting, and I'll see you in the skies.